Under the freezing Denver Ridge night, a luxury black SUV lay twisted at the foot of the cliff, its metal groaning beneath the weight of the storm. She was supposed to make it home before the blizzard hit, supposed to finish the drive like every other night. Yet fate had crushed her world in a single violent spin of the wheel. A young mother in a blazing red coat struggled in the wreckage, blood sliding down her cheek, her breath sharp and uneven. In her trembling arms, her newborn daughter, wrapped in a pastel pink blanket, let out a thin, weakening cry that barely rose above the wind. Cars rushed past on the distant highway, their headlights slicing through the snow, pretending not to notice the disaster buried below the ridge. But the German shepherd at her side did notice. He pressed forward, chest heaving, as she placed the fragile baby into his jaws with a desperate whisper, unaware that this act of faith would turn him into the unlikely hero who would soon shake the entire city awake. And she had no idea the decision she made in that frozen darkness would alter every life waiting for her beyond the hospital doors. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories. Denver Ridge, nestled deep within the rugged Colorado mountains, was a city of glass towers, wealthy estates, and winding cliffside roads that glittered like silver threads under winter storms. On this night, however, its elegance was swallowed by the brutality of a blizzard. Snow whipped across the dark sky in violent spirals, coating every rooftop, every tree, every lonely stretch of highway with a pale, merciless sheen. Icicles clung to street signs like frozen claws, and the wind howled against the mountain ridges as if warning travelers away. Far above the city center, the cliff roads were especially unforgiving, twisting dangerously between sharp drops and tight curves. It was along one of those roads that a sleek black SUV cut through the storm, its headlights flickering in the swirling snow. Inside sat Sarah Whitmore, a 28-year-old mother whose beauty had the polished glow of someone born into old money, yet softened by a warmth not often found among Denver Ridge's elite. Tall and slender, with long auburn hair cascading over the collar of her vibrant scarlet wool trench coat, Sarah carried the elegance of a magazine model, but the seriousness of a woman who had endured storms far colder than the one outside. Her hazel eyes, usually bright, focused, commanding, now darted anxiously toward the windshield as the wipers struggled against the blinding snow. Sarah was returning from a high-profile New Year's charity gala, the kind attended by CEOs, senators, and heirs of legacy families. Despite her youthful age, she had built a reputation for kindness and quiet intelligence, though it was also whispered that the recent death of her husband in a skiing accident had carved a lingering sadness beneath her poised surface. Cradled in the back seat was her newborn daughter, wrapped snugly in a soft, pastel-pink blanket that smelled faintly of warm milk and baby powder. The infant, barely a month old, had inherited Sarah's delicate features, a tiny button nose, rosy cheeks, and wisps of soft brown hair, but was too young to understand the danger surrounding them. To her, the world was warmth, shadows, and her mother's heartbeat. Beside the baby lay Ranger, the family's 3-year-old German shepherd, a large, powerfully built dog with thick sable fur, alert, intelligent eyes, and a quiet, disciplined demeanor that marked him as more guardian than pet. Ranger had been trained by Sarah's late husband, a former military K-9 handler, which explained the dog's unwavering loyalty and precise reactions. Ranger rarely barked without reason, and he sensed the tension inside the SUV long before Sarah spoke a word. The snowfall intensified, turning the cliff road into a treacherous white blur. Sarah tightened her grip on the steering wheel, her knuckles pale against the leather. The tires skidded slightly as a gust of wind slammed against the side of the vehicle. She inhaled sharply. "Easy, easy," she murmured to herself, though her voice trembled. Ranger shifted, his ears perking as the SUV rounded another blind curve. Then, through the wall of swirling snow, a massive truck appeared, its headlights exploding through the darkness like two burning suns. It barreled toward them, swerving across the center line, out of control. Sarah gasped. She jerked the wheel left, but the road was slick, the tires powerless. The world tilted. Metal screamed. The SUV spun violently, smashing into the guardrail before flipping down the embankment. Snow and dirt exploded around them as the vehicle rolled, crashing against rocks until finally coming to rest on its side. Silence fell except for the hiss of settling snow. Sarah tasted blood. Pain seared through her leg, pinned beneath the crushed dashboard. She tried to move, but her vision blurred. She blinked rapidly, fighting consciousness. "My baby," she whispered hoarsely. In the back seat, Ranger was already pushing against the broken door, his body shaking but functional. The newborn's cry rose weakly, fragile as a snowflake. Sarah forced herself to look back. "Ranger!" Her voice fractured. The German shepherd immediately crawled toward her, placing his head near her shoulder. His eyes, dark, intelligent, locked onto hers, waiting for instruction. Sarah knew she was losing time. The cold was sinking into her skin, numbing her fingers, slowing her thoughts. Her baby's cries were weakening. She had minutes, maybe less, before hypothermia claimed them both. With trembling fingers, she unwrapped part of the pastel pink blanket and gently, carefully repositioned her daughter. Ranger lowered his head, instinctively supporting the fragile bundle with the gentlest part of his jaws, the way trained search dogs carried injured pups. Sarah cupped Ranger's face with her shaking hands, her breath fogging in the freezing air. "Take her to the hospital, please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Bring help. Come back for me." Ranger responded with a deep, solemn rumble, a vow as ancient as loyalty itself. Then he slipped through the shattered window, the newborn secured in the warm hollow of the blanket, and vanished into the roaring white storm. Sarah's head fell back against the seat, her breath slowing. She stared into the night, praying. Suddenly, far away, a pair of headlights appeared on the ridge, approaching slowly. But through the blizzard, she couldn't tell if salvation was coming, or something far more dangerous. Ranger burst into the blizzard, like a shadow torn from the wreckage, each stride cutting through knee-deep snow as if the freezing night could not lay claim to him. The pastel pink bundle in his jaws was warm but fragile, the newborn's faint breaths fluttering against the blanket, like a candle struggling against the wind. The storm raged viciously around them, coating Ranger's sable fur with a growing crust of ice while the fresh cut on his foreleg dripped a thin trail of blood behind him, stark red against the endless white. His muscles trembled, but his resolve was iron. He had been trained to protect, and tonight he carried the most precious command ever given to him. The mountainside forests of Denver Ridge, normally serene and postcard perfect, had become a labyrinth of black pines and shrieking wind. Ranger moved with the instinct of a seasoned survivor, darting between fallen branches, leaping over half-buried rocks, pausing just long enough to shield the fragile infant against his chest whenever the wind threatened to knock him sideways. The newborn girl, though only weeks old, clung to life with a tiny resilience. The blanket wrapped tightly around her small form radiated faint warmth, but her skin still held a bluish tint, her breaths barely audible. Ranger gently pressed her into the thick fur of his neck, sharing what warmth he could as he forged ahead. A sudden crack of ice split the silence behind him. Ranger whipped his head around, ears raised. From the shadowed edge of the tree line emerged a gray mountain wolf, its lean body taut with hunger and desperation. The wolf was an older male, ribs showing through its winter coat, eyes glowing yellow with caution and primal instinct. Denver Ridge's worsening winter had driven many predators dangerously close to populated areas, and this wolf was no exception. Ranger lowered himself, placing the baby between his front legs, his posture shifting from exhausted runner to fierce defender. The wolf paced in a slow arc, testing the distance, its paws sinking silently into the snow. Its tail hung low, signaling wariness but also determination. The scent of blood leaking from Ranger's wound had drawn it in. Snow surged between them, swirling like white dust in the beam of moonlight breaking through the clouds. The two animals stared at each other, breath steaming, muscles coiled. Ranger growled, a deep rumble that vibrated through the ground, but his eyes held something the wolf recognized. Unyielding purpose, something greater than mere survival. After a long, tense moment, the wolf's ears flicked back. Perhaps it sensed the newborn. Perhaps it understood the impossible weight Ranger carried. With a low grunt, it backed away, fading into the tree line. Only when the glowing eyes disappeared entirely did Ranger lift the baby again and continue running, though his legs now shook with exhaustion. Hours seemed to pass as he crossed narrow ridges, sloshed through half-frozen streams, and climbed slopes where the wind clawed at him like a living force. Just when his body threatened to collapse, a soft golden glow appeared through the avalanche of snow, a promise in the darkness. Denver Ridge General Hospital. The building rose from the edge of the city like a beacon, its emergency entrance illuminated by harsh fluorescent lights that shimmered against the glass doors. Ranger stumbled toward it, limping but determined. As the automatic doors hissed open, a blast of warm air hit him. Inside, two nurses were walking briskly across the lobby. One a middle-aged woman named Nancy Doyle, a short and sturdy nurse with crow's feet around her brown eyes, and the calm authority of someone who had spent 20 years handling medical chaos. The other, Ethan Brooks, a tall, soft-spoken nurse in his early 30s with sandy hair, neatly trimmed beard, and a gentle manner shaped by losing his younger sister to illness years prior, making him unusually protective of infants. Nancy spotted the dark shape entering the lobby and frowned. "Is that a dog?" she muttered, already stepping forward. Ethan joined her, squinting. When Ranger finally reached them, he collapsed onto his side, chest heaving, his fur soaked with snowmelt. The pastel-pink blanket slipped slightly, revealing the newborn's tiny face, pale, lips tinged blue. Nancy gasped. "Oh my God! Ethan! It's a baby!" The lobby erupted. Ethan dropped to his knees, hands moving with trained precision as he gently lifted the infant from Ranger's trembling jaws. His voice cracked with disbelief. "She's freezing. She's barely breathing. Nancy, call code neonate, now!" Nancy sprinted toward the intercom, while Ethan wrapped the baby tighter, checking her pulse with trembling fingers. "Stay with me, sweetheart. Stay with me," he whispered. Doctors and nurses surged out from the emergency department, wheeling equipment, snapping gloves onto cold hands. The baby was rushed down the hall in a flurry of shouted orders and clattering wheels, vanishing behind double doors. While chaos unfolded, Ranger forced himself upright, though his vision blurred. His paws slipped on the tile as he dragged himself forward, head lifting toward the entrance. He growled low, not in threat, but as a warning, a signal. Someone or something was still out there in the storm. Ethan paused, hearing the sound, and glanced toward the glass doors, where the blizzard still howled. "What is it, boy?" he murmured. Ranger's eyes remained fixed on the darkness beyond the lights, waiting, listening, bracing. A presence was coming. The chapter ends with Ethan stepping closer to Ranger, heart pounding as he followed the dog's gaze into the storm, realizing that whatever had driven Ranger here wasn't finished yet. The storm had eased by the time the first wave of Denver Ridge police cruisers slid to a stop outside the hospital, their blue and red lights cutting through what little fog still clung to the parking lot. Word had spread with wildfire speed, a German shepherd bringing a dying newborn into the ER, and now the city's law enforcement moved with sharp urgency. Inside the lobby, Ranger sat upright despite exhaustion, his body trembling, but his gaze locked on the glass doors, as if guarding them from some invisible threat. The arrival of the police only heightened his alertness. Leading the response team was Lieutenant Mark Halstead, a broad-shouldered man in his mid-40s with a thick salt and pepper beard, square jaw, and eyes that looked permanently narrowed from years of squinting through crime scenes and bad weather. His presence carried quiet authority, shaped by a long career that had hardened him yet not robbed him of empathy. A former search and rescue coordinator, he had a reputation for being methodical, steady, and relentlessly committed once he took on a case. Behind him stepped Officer Lucas Hayes, a young and eager patrolman in his early 20s. Lucas had a clean-shaven baby face, short blonde hair, and a nervous habit of tapping his fingers against his belt whenever stressed. He came from a long line of police officers, though he struggled to live up to his father's stern expectations. Tonight, he hoped this case would be a chance to prove himself. As the officers approached Ranger, Lucas pulled out a handheld microchip scanner. "Easy, boy. Let's see who you belong to," he said, voice trembling slightly. The scanner beeped as he stepped closer. Ranger stiffened instantly, his fur rising, his muscles flexing despite exhaustion. He backed away in a guarded arc, his gaze flicking toward the exit doors. Mark raised a hand. "Hayes, hold up. He's not acting like a stray. He's tracking something." Lucas swallowed. "Sir, he won't let me scan him." "He's protecting a trail," Mark murmured, studying the dog with a penetrating gaze. "Someone's still out there." A moment later, Ethan Brooks, the nurse who had helped revive the newborn, ran over, still wearing his scrubs. His face was flushed, sandy hair messily swept back, a reflection of the adrenaline-filled chaos inside the ER. "Lieutenant, Ranger isn't hurt beyond exhaustion. But the baby, she wouldn't have survived much longer out in that cold. Someone needs help out there." Mark gave a single decisive nod. "Then we follow him." Within minutes, the police clipped a lightweight tracking lead onto Ranger's collar. The dog resisted for only a second, then tugged forward, pulling them toward the exit with renewed urgency, as if time itself were slipping through his paws. The officers followed him into the snowy night. Ranger led them swiftly through the city streets, weaving between icy sidewalks and snow-buried alleyways. Denver Ridge was still waking from the storm. Plow trucks hummed in the distance, their orange lights casting slow-moving halos across the ground. Mark jogged beside Ranger, his boots crunching through the snow. Lucas trailed a few steps behind, breath fogging out in unsteady bursts. "Where do you think he's taking us, Lieutenant?" Lucas asked. "Back to the origin," Mark replied. "Dogs like this, they don't lose direction." Soon Ranger guided them past the city limits, where the clean sidewalks gave way to rugged mountain trails and towering pines coated white like frozen soldiers. The wind whispered through the branches, scattering loose snowflakes onto the officers' jackets. As they entered the cliffside road, Mark lifted a flashlight, sweeping the beam through the swirling air. Then Ranger halted. He let out a low, mournful cry that echoed across the ridge. Below them, illuminated by the circle of Mark's flashlight, lay the black SUV, flipped onto its side and half buried beneath fallen snow. "There!" Mark called out. "Spread out! Check for survivors!" Lucas rushed forward, carefully descending the embankment. Oh man, this thing rolled hard. The SUV's windows were shattered, the side panels crushed inward like a crumpled tin can. Snow dusted the seats, and glass littered the ground like spilled diamonds. But the driver's seat, where Sarah had been trapped, was empty. Mark crouched, running his light along the frosted metal. Blood and drag marks. Lucas followed the beam of light. A trail of deep, uneven impressions in the snow stretched away from the car. Drag lines, smeared with streaks of frozen blood. "She pulled herself out," Lucas whispered. "She was alive when the dog left." Mark scanned the surrounding woods. The trees stood tall and shadowed, their trunks narrowing into darkness. "Two sets of prints," he muttered. "One's hers. The other, bigger." "Someone else was here?" Lucas asked, eyes widening. "Looks like it." Mark straightened. "Call in search and rescue and drones. We follow the dog on foot." Ranger thrust his nose into the snow, inhaling deeply, then released a sharp, urgent bark. In the next instant, he sprinted toward the tree line, dragging the officers with him. Branches snapped beneath their boots as they plunged into the forest. The deeper they went, the darker the woods became. The quiet pierced only by Ranger's determined barking. Suddenly a voice sliced through the stillness. Another officer who had wandered ahead from the other side of the ridge. "Lieutenant! Over here!" Mark and Lucas spun toward the voice. Through the trees, a flashlight beam flickered wildly. "Stand back!" the officer shouted, breathless. There's a second set of tracks. Someone besides the mother, someone big, was dragging something deeper into the woods." And just like that, the search took a darker turn. The forest swallowed them whole as soon as they crossed the first line of frost-bitten pines. Ranger charged ahead, weaving between trees with desperate determination. Nose low to the ground as he traced the faint scent of blood, cold earth, and something far more unsettling, cigarette smoke, sharp and recent. The officers followed, their flashlights slicing through the night like trembling swords of white light. Behind them, the wind roared through the branches, scattering flakes of snow that seemed to whisper warnings through the darkness. Lieutenant Mark Halstead pressed forward with grim intensity, the weight of experience etched into every line of his weathered face. His heavy boots sank into the snow with each step, yet his movements remained steady, deliberate. Beside him stumbled Officer Lucas Hayes, younger and lighter on his feet, though the nerves jittering through him were almost palpable. His breath came fast, clouding the air, and his gloved fingers twitched as he tried to keep pace with the trained German shepherd. Ranger suddenly stopped, muscles taut, hackles raised. His ears flicked forward, catching something the humans could not yet hear. Mark lowered his light. "What do you have, boy?" The dog growled, low, warning, protective. The smell of blood had grown stronger. Up ahead, in a narrow gorge where jagged rocks jutted out like broken teeth, the trail deepened. The snow was disturbed, dragged, smeared with dark streaks that looked black under the moon. Mark crouched, brushing gloved fingers over the frozen surface. More blood and drag marks. She couldn't have gone far. Lucas swallowed hard. But she wasn't alone. He gestured toward a second, heavier imprint in the snow. Larger boot tracks, deep set, erratic. Their spacing suggested hurry, maybe aggression. Someone strong, someone driven. Ranger barked suddenly, jerking the leash so hard Lucas stumbled forward. "Easy, Ranger," Lucas hissed, barely keeping hold. But the dog wasn't listening. His entire body leaned toward the gorge, trembling with urgency. Mark's flashlight swept forward and caught on something fluttering against a rock. "There. Something's ahead." The officers moved closer. It was Sarah's red scarf, half buried in the snow, its wool fibers stiff with frozen blood. The sight squeezed the breath from Lucas's lungs. Mark's voice hardened. "She's alive. She has to be." Ranger growled again, deeper this time, then lunged toward a cluster of boulders at the far end of the gorge. As the officers rounded the final bend, their beams landed on two shapes in the darkness. One was a tall man, broad-shouldered, clad in a heavy black winter coat, his hair matted beneath a wool cap. His jawline was rough with an unshaven beard, giving him a feral appearance, like someone who had been out in the wilderness far too long. His name would later be known as Calder Briggs, a drifter in his late 30s, with cold gray eyes and a gaunt face that hinted at years of hardship. Homelessness, addiction, and mental instability had carved deep creases around his mouth, giving him a haunted expression. He clutched something metallic in one hand, a small hatchet-sized tool, its blade glinting sharply in the flashlight beam. The other figure was Sarah, collapsed against the snow, her red coat torn, her auburn hair tangled with frost. Her skin was pale, lips bluish, and her breaths shallow. Her leg dragged behind her, leaving the trail of smeared blood they had been following. Calder stood over her, chest heaving, eyes wild. Ranger reacted first. With a guttural roar, he lunged, teeth bared. Calder startled, nearly dropping the tool, then hurled a small object, possibly a metal thermos or pocket flashlight, toward the charging dog before spinning and sprinting into the trees. The object clanged against the rocks and rolled aside. "Stop! Police!" Mark shouted, already giving chase, boots pounding against the snow. Lucas followed, though Ranger veered instead toward Sarah, skidding to her side. The dog planted himself in front of her, chest heaving, growling into the shadows where Calder had vanished. Ranger's body shook, not just from exhaustion, but from sheer protectiveness. Sarah's eyes fluttered open, unfocused. The flashlight's glow illuminated her face, revealing how the cold had carved it into a mask of pain and fading strength. Her breath hitched as Ranger nudged her cheek gently, whimpering. "Ma'am," Lucas said, kneeling beside her. "You're safe now. We've got you." Sarah reached out with trembling fingers, burying them in Ranger's thick fur. Her voice was barely a whisper. "The baby. Did he?" Lucas froze. "Ma'am, what about the baby?" Mark's distant shouts echoed through the woods as he continued chasing Calder, but the forest felt eerily quiet around Sarah. She could not finish the sentence. Her eyes rolled back slightly, breaths faltering as the cold tightened its grip. Lucas shouted for medical support, but Sarah's fingers loosened, her head tilting as consciousness slipped away. Her unfinished words hung in the air, chilling every heart that heard them. "The baby has—" Ranger whimpered, pressing his head against her shoulder as though urging her to stay awake. But the night swallowed her words, leaving the officers stunned, the mystery deepening, and the forest trembling with unanswered fear. The storm had faded by the time the rescue team reached the hospital, but the bitter cold clung stubbornly to the night as Sarah Whitmore was rushed through the emergency doors on a stretcher. Her face pale beneath streaks of dried blood, barely moved as paramedics stabilized her. Her scarlet trench coat, now torn and frozen stiff in places, still clung to her like a silent reminder of the cliffside horror she survived. Doctors called for a red-level trauma response, their urgent footsteps echoing across the brightly lit corridors. Ranger followed close behind until the swinging double doors blocked him. The German shepherd stopped abruptly, swaying on trembling legs. His fur was matted with melting snow, and dried blood from his earlier cuts stained the dark sable coat. He lowered himself slowly onto the cold tile floor outside the trauma room, refusing to move an inch even when nurses attempted to coax him away for treatment. The dog's brown eyes, glossy, exhausted, yet fiercely alert, remained glued to the door as though sheer willpower could keep Sarah alive. Through the glass panes, shadows of the medical team moved rapidly. Sarah's life now hung in the hands of strangers, but Ranger stood as her silent guardian, just as he had stood in the snow-covered forest. Meanwhile, in another wing of the hospital, the newborn girl lay cradled inside a softly lit bassinet in the neonatal care room. A blanket of pastel pink wrapped around her tiny form, and the gentle hum of monitoring machines kept time with her steadily improving heartbeat. Beside her, Nurse Ethan Brooks watched carefully, his usually calm face softened with relief. His sandy brown hair fell slightly over his forehead as he leaned in, adjusting the infant's oxygen tubing. Ethan had always been gentle with fragile lives, shaped by the loss of his younger sister years earlier. And now the sight of the baby's rosy cheeks felt like a victory he desperately needed. "You're safe now, little one," he whispered. "Your mom's fighting too." Back in the trauma wing, time crawled. Ranger's breathing grew shallow, his eyelids heavy, but he never took his gaze off the door. Several staff members passed by, including Dr. Helena Rowan, a tall woman in her early 50s with silver-streaked black hair and sharp blue eyes softened by decades of compassion. She had the firm elegance of a leader who had weathered countless emergencies. A faint scar beneath her jaw hinted at a past incident, one she rarely spoke of, yet it lent her presence a quiet authority. She paused when she noticed Ranger. "You've done enough for tonight, brave boy," she murmured, crouching beside him. Ranger merely blinked, unresponsive. His loyalty was immovable. Hours stretched until finally, with a metallic click, the trauma room doors opened. Dr. Rowan stepped out, removing her gloves, fatigue lining her face. Ranger pushed himself upright, barely standing. She offered him a tired smile. "She's going to make it." It was close, but she pulled through. Ranger's tail lifted slightly, giving a faint wag, a gesture so small yet filled with indescribable relief. When Sarah awoke several hours later, her lashes fluttered weakly against her bruised skin. The sterile glow of the hospital ceiling did little to orient her. Her head turned slowly, painfully, until she saw the shape curled at her bedside. Ranger. His head rested gently on the mattress, eyes half-closed yet vigilant. Sarah exhaled in a shudder, tears welling instantly. Her voice cracked, fragile. "You You came back. Ranger lifted his head, nudging her hand with a soft whimper. That simple touch unraveled her. Tears spilled freely. My baby. Is she? She's alive. Dr. Rowan entered, her voice warm, stronger by the minute. And it's thanks to him. Sarah reached out again, gripping Ranger's fur, her gratitude trembling in every word. You saved my daughter. You saved me. Later, once stabilized, Sarah was wheeled to the neonatal room. Her eyes widened instantly upon seeing her infant sleeping peacefully beneath golden lights. The baby's chest rose and fell with quiet steadiness. With trembling hands, Sarah brushed her fingers along her daughter's cheek. Thank you, she whispered, her voice breaking. Thank you for holding on. Ranger stood by the doorway, watching mother and child reunite. His ears perked slightly, tail swaying with gentle pride. News of the miraculous rescue spread across Denver Ridge within hours. People sent flowers, blankets, gift baskets stuffed with newborn essentials. Some who had never known compassion themselves found their hearts softened by the tale of a dog who braved a storm to deliver a baby to safety. Volunteers offered temporary housing, and local officials extended support. In the following days, Sarah, though still recovering, was released from the hospital with her child. They moved into a newly prepared home near the quieter outskirts of Denver Ridge, surrounded by snowy pines and morning sun that filtered gently through tall windows. Ranger joined them, of course, padding confidently along the hallway like a guardian returning to his rightful post. Sarah stood one morning at the wooden porch of her new home, her baby nestled against her chest, the pastel pink blanket glowing softly under the sunlight. Ranger sat beside her, head high, ears alert, his noble silhouette etched against the brilliant sky. For a moment, all was still, peaceful. The storm had passed, not just the one on the mountain, but the one in their lives. And as the golden morning light spilled across the porch, the small family stepped forward together, marking a beginning shaped by survival, loyalty, and the unbreakable bond between a mother, her child, and the German shepherd who refused to give up on them. In the quiet glow of a new morning, as Sarah held her child close and Ranger rested faithfully at their feet, one truth shone brighter than the sun rising over Denver Ridge. Miracles do not always arrive in the form we expect. Sometimes God sends them on four legs, wrapped in loyalty, courage, and a heart willing to walk through a storm for us. Life is fragile, unexpected, often cruel, and filled with nights colder than any blizzard. Yet even in our darkest valleys, there are moments when heaven reaches down, through a stranger's kindness, a mother's prayer, or the unwavering love of a loyal animal. These moments remind us that God still moves among us, guiding those willing to act with compassion, protecting those who cannot protect themselves, and lighting a path even when the world feels impossibly dark. As you go through your own days, your own storms, may you look for the small signs of grace around you. A helping hand, a gentle word, a loyal friend, a miracle disguised in fur and steady paws, and may you remember to be that miracle for someone else. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to share it, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel, not just to support these stories, but to spread a message of hope in a world desperately in need of it. May God bless you, protect your family, and guide your steps through every storm you face. May His angels, both the human kind and the four-legged kind, watch over you always. Amen.